Hello from Sahara. I am an NDEer. I was not a likely candidate for otherworldly adventures. I grew up in a Mayberry type setting, and I had I Love Lucy, America Bandstand, and Leave It to Beaver. I was raised by two Victorian grandparents, both Capricorns, and me, a double Capricorn. So that's about as grounded as you can get. And how did I go from the Victorian upbringing to adventures out in the universe? My journey actually began in 1966. I in the caverns of Geico Insurance Company. I It was very large. It just had about, it seems like, a couple acres of uh, filing cabinets, and it was our job to go down in these. You cannot describe the caverns in the underbellies of Geico before. I saw a local girl from my local hometown, which was kind of unusual since my hometown was a couple hours outside of Washington, D.C. And we recognized each other, but I didn't really know her well. And we just said, hey, how you doing? And as, as we were going through the filing cabinets and files, you just have to imagine what a computer holds and then putting it all on paper. It was quite an amazing experience. And all of a sudden, I felt faint, and I fell across the filing cabinet in front of the local girl. I exclaimed, you know, she came over and said, what's the matter? And I said, oh, I feel like a funeral. I've seen a funeral, and it involves a president's name. And I just know I'm going to a funeral. She was like, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, never mind. I have a headache. I have to go. And I ran off. I couldn't explain that. I went into a restroom and splashed water on my face. 2 days later, I got a call about Beaver. He was this gorgeous local boy. His name was Beaver Kennedy. Tall, red hair, as Irish as they come, and full of life, bright. And look, he was young. He was only 16. Apparently, he had died in a hunting accident, and Beaver was dead. The first death that you really run across when you're young like that, it knocks you out of that world where you believe you're going to live forever. Death has never crossed your path before, and you just don't understand. Someone so young. I remember going to the funeral at Arlington Cemetery, and it was always, every time I've ever been to a funeral, it's always raining. It must be my karma. And I heard the priest say, and now we lay John Kennedy to rest. And he said some incantations. And I looked up at the sky through the rain. I said, John Kennedy. That's right. Beaver was a nickname. He didn't like having, I guess, the name of a dead president. It was just very sad. I couldn't get over it. Later on, I was back at my grandparents' home. I was lying in bed crying. I just didn't understand. And that's when I knew Beaver was standing at the foot of my bed. Well, I can't tell you what that was like for me at the time. It's unnerving even now at this age. If I had somebody walk in and stand at the foot of my bed, you know, these things always take us back. But then that was just too much. I dove under the covers. I began praying. I said, "Oh, please don't let me see this. Oh, please make this go away." I began to realize that something different was happening to me. And that's when Beaver said, and it was like, this is what all people say when they have been in the presence of spirit beings, that it's all telepathy. And I heard him say in my mind, "Please don't cry for me. Let me show you where I am." And in my mind's eye, I felt it. There was this beautiful, beautiful scene where young people can play for the rest of their lives. It seemed kind of timeless. It involved horseback riding, ice skating. The cool thing was there was an ice skating pond. There was horseback riding. There was lakes. And it was all springtime, which was kind of interesting since it was a natural frozen pond, which was like where we lived when we were growing up. There was a natural pond that we would go skating in the winter. But it was cold. This was kind of like all these cool things, but it wasn't cold. And also there were Ferris wheels. Then there was a feeling in the air that really, when you're in a heavenly environment, there is no air. When you're out of your body or out of the organic structure of things, there's no air. There's no gravity. Everything that we depend on physically is just not there. You don't need everything's telepathic. And in the air, instead of air, there was laughter. There was laughter in the air. Like, if you think of air being H2O, this would have been like H2OL, L for laughter. So I was just so swept away with the beauty and joy of it all. And the vision faded, and I fell asleep, quite confused. I just had this feeling something had changed in my life, a lot. Then back in D.C., I was filing in the Geico caverns, and somehow, I don't think it was an accident that I ran across that young girl from my school. I never seen her before, and I never saw her again. I think that we were supposed to be together, involved in this experience with Beaver. So she accosted me in the, mind you, I never saw her again. She was a real person, though. It's just our paths in that gigantic company just went into different directions. And she approached me and said, "What were you talking about? How did you know Beaver was going to die?" And she was very accusing. I said, I just said, "I haven't been feeling well. She must be hearing things." I was always in this. I began learning how to just go into denial. It never happened. I didn't see it. What are you talking about? Etc. So, and life went on. At least not in the ordinary sense for me. Just a year later, I was leaving an airport. I was in a limo, and I was traveling with a lot of people, mostly young businessmen. And we're being dropped off in different destinations. And I was just chatting next to a young businessman next to me, and we were laughing. It was springtime, and everything was so beautiful. The winter was over, and we just felt so good about uh, no more winter. So, and we were laughing, and he was quite charming. And we went into a tunnel. Just Washington has lots of tunnels because of all the freeways, and it was yellow. It was yellow tile. As we entered the tunnel, I started staring, and I went into the future. Mind you, I'm talking, we're laughing, it's a beautiful day, and boom, I'm in the future. I was in a time much like now. I knew I had gone way up in the future, and I was in a cavern, and I knew something terrible had happened. It was like I was not in a bomb shelter, but a gigantic cavern underground. And it seemed like there was no life. There's no life anywhere, just me. And I walked out of these stairs. The cavern had stairs, and I walked out onto Constitution Avenue, and I saw all the big, impressive buildings along Constitution. And but there were no people. It was this. I think, if anything impressed me the most, it was the silence. You know, of course, a big city like that, noise is part of the is part of the air, you know. And I looked around, and the nothing was alive. Everything was like there was some weeds growing up along the buildings, but there's no life, no trees, no nothing. And I said, it looked to me like Rome, but it wasn't. I was in Washington, D.C., with the big marble buildings. And I just didn't understand. I knew that everybody and everything was dead. And I was just shocked. And I looked around. It was just me. The main thing was no life, no trees, no nothing. However, the buildings were intact. That was the most important thing, because when you look at the Colosseum in Rome and Greece, the buildings are not intact. That many of them are halfway knocked down, and they look like ruins. The buildings, especially, trying to remember some of the buildings' names, they were intact. They were untouched, you know. So I knew that no bombs had gone off. You know, if it was a nuclear war, it wouldn't be like that. The thing was that no life, not even a grasshopper. That was what was so striking. Not a bird, not a sound. And the next thing I knew, the young man next to me was shaking me. And he said, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What's wrong?" Well, I went back into my normal denial, like, oh, nothing. I have a cold. It's allergies. I've had a long day, and that was that. That's all. Nobody was going to get a peep out of me, but how could I forget that? I'll never forget that, ever. As I went on through life, I did. I didn't even finish college. I didn't have children. Of course not. But who could I tell? Who could I tell about an experience like that? Now, of course, when you are 19, that's when life is moving very closely for you, for everybody. Let's fast forward to Miami. I had a job there. I was a flight attendant, and I was going to school at Miami-Dade. And so in between the flights, I could go to school. It was hard to work out, but I did. And I was driving down a side street on my way to school. And I hit a milk truck. It hit me. That's all I remember. I'm driving down the street on my way to school, and then I'm in outer space. I kid you not. And the funny thing is, you adapt very quickly. And my experience, the thing is, my experience was not like the normal NDE experiences. No tunnels, no angels, none of that. It was like I was driving down the street, and then I was in the upper stratospheres of the earth. It wasn't until like maybe 30 or 40 years later I found an account by Carl Jung who had the very same experience. Apparently there is a small amount of people that will have, it's like you're here, then you're there. However, there are some things about the afterlife, or the life that we leave when we die, is there's no air. And there's no, well, I hope I can explain a little bit better. People like that are NDers, sometimes they just can't, they don't have the words. The one thing I have been talking about in some of my YouTubes is that we are the only sentient beings that communicate verbally. All other beings, doesn't matter what they are, angels, aliens, saints, you name it, or even if someone you love, you communicate with them, it's all nonverbal. We are moving into an age where we will be nonverbal as well. We're just kind of, I guess we're in the back of the class as far as advancement. But I suppose that we're heading to that now. There's many things that in the studies of the yugas, which I did a YouTube on, shows how we are advancing and progressing. And all of these things that are part of an advanced civilization is happening to us now. And so you'll see all the things that happen as far as we moved into an age where there's only, first there's a lot of different languages, and then it gets narrowed down to one language. And then pretty soon we speak with anagrams, such as LOL, or by the way, or BFF. So everything, it gets narrowed down more and more to one language. And then equality of the sexes on all races and religions become equal. So we have a ways to go, but it's happening right now. And you might recognize that time is changing, is speeding up. The world that your grandparents, great-grandparents lived in, and the one that you live in, there's a little difference. Now, none of this was easy for me. I can't tell you. You know, my denial and was amazing, and you couldn't pry out of me what was happening. The funny thing is, there are other people like NDers or intuitives. They know, they recognize you. I did have people come up to me as in my early 20s, and they would kind of be accusing, or they would not want to know my past. They go, we know that you're different. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. You couldn't get me to fess up at all. I had a boyfriend that was, he liked to astro travel and meditate. He didn't last long in my life. It was like, oh, no, you don't. Bios con Dios, pal. You're too weird for me. However, it was happening to me, too. So, in the NDE, there is, when you're out of your body, there's no hunger, there's no temperature. You still have a sense of self, a sense of self. You're still you know, but your body begins to fade. And unless you have to um, identify yourself to somebody. If another being, or if you are communicating with an earth person, your body will tend to show a little bit. But after that, when you're in out of body, your sense of body disappears a little. It's still there, which is kind of interesting. Now you see why you can't. People like me, they try, but for me, I was in denial, and I can't explain. I couldn't explain how the age I grew up in. There was no words. There was no language. My sister took me to see a therapist. It was too awful. If I tried to explain it to people, it was just terrible. It's the way people reacted to me. My grandmother said I hit my head too hard in the car accident. No, that wasn't it. You can't take an deer and convince them that you can't, that it was the result of something like drugs or trauma. No, you know very well you've been to another place. So, and you travel with thought. As my experience, like Carl Jung's, they're almost identical. And I knew exactly where I wanted to go. The thing is, I had a life. I had a family. I had a life back on Earth. Let me tell you how fast you forget all about it. And you've heard those kind of stories before, maybe, where, people just, you're kind of quite sure everything will be just fine with your family, and you never give what you're most attached to on Earth another thought, which was amazing. And I knew exactly where I wanted to go, which is, that's another thing that you can't explain that. I saw off in the distance the city of knowledge. I knew that once I left the Earth's stratospheres, which I think I was up beyond to where satellites are, but I was still in the Earth's stratosphere. And I knew that once I left that, I was no longer in our solar system. I was no longer part of the physical world. Our solar system is, and so is all the universe that we know about, is part of a physical reality. Once you take, it's like walking from one room to another. Once you leave the Earth's influence, is good, you're in another reality. You're not where the planets are. You're not where anything that we look through our telescopes have. You're in a different world, a different reality. It's a good way to put it. So the planets are part of our physical reality. I should know. I ended up studying astrology for the rest of my life. I had to find answers, I suppose. So I knew where I wanted to go, and I was off to this golden city. You might want to think of it as floating on a cloud. Now, it sounds pretty heavenly, but it was, I knew it was in a different reality, and I wanted to go there. I just knew where to go and how to get there. It's kind of like Dorothy and Alice. You kind of like, you know where you're wanting to go, and you're trying to get there. So, very interesting when science fiction writers are writing about these things. And I wanted to go to the city of knowledge. And that kind of beat out Miami-Dade College in Miami. I'm not kidding. You know things instantly, which is amazing. I want to save what I learned in the city of knowledge to another time, because it is interesting, but it's for another time. As well, in the bottom of um, this YouTube, I'm going to put what I learned about the yugas, which is the progression of time. Now, here is the really cool thing. Later on, mind you, I'm not telling anybody any of this. Now, it is many years later, and my voice was injured in another accident a couple years ago, so my voice is a little uneven. And my voice problem didn't have anything to do with that car accident in Miami. A memory that I bring back from my near-death experience is, before life, there is God. After life, there is God. Everything else in between is just God's dream. The interesting thing is, many years later, I returned back to Washington, D.C. To have a life there. I changed occupations. However, I hadn't been in D.C. for a good 15 years. And I was walking around with an acquaintance, and we saw a metro rail go by us, and she said, "Oh, there goes Metro." I said, "What do you mean? What is that?" And she said, "Oh, they built, while you were gone, they built this whole subway under and over the town, and it's quite advanced. It was quite futuristic and beautiful." And I was like, "Really?" And she says, "Yeah, here." And we walked down Pennsylvania. I guess we were in Georgetown. Walked down to a metro stop, and we went into the, into the station under the ground. And I knew then that's where I had been many years before, when I had my my trip into the future. You see, I had been in the future, and there were caverns underground. When that experience happened with the young man in the limo, there's no metro. There's no such thing. Now I come back 15 years later, and there's this futuristic metro system that you had to go down under the earth into these large caverns. And that kind of clued me into, I really did go into the future, and there really is going to be a big change. You must realize that by the time I returned to Washington, I was 32, and I still had not married. You see, if you've been in the future and everybody's gone, you're not real thrilled about having children. But also, who do you talk to? And there really was evidence that I had truly been up in the future. Now, what could it be, actually? It's happening now. If the poles shift, if global warming continues, we will have a flood like we had about, 10,000 years ago. And simply everything will be washed away. That's why there was no cars, no people, no sign of life, just big buildings that looked like the Colosseum. And that's probably what's going to happen. And unless we get busy now, I've learned a tiny bit about parallel universes, and so let's just hope I saw a possible future. That's where we're heading to now, and it's happening now. And did I know that then in 1967? No, I didn't. So now, what did a trip to the future, Beaver's death, and there were some other small things that I was still in denial that they'd happen, have to do with my NDE experience? Note that Beaver and the trip into the future happened before I had the car accident and went to the city of knowledge. That I joined I just recently joined a NDE group, and this is where people talk about their experiences, and apparently there's a very large percent of NDEers that have some smaller experiences leading up to the NDE, and that they all happen within a couple years time frame, which is very hard to understand. But when you get into this, that there is no time and parallel universes, I guess you can kind of make that fit. You have to remember, I'm a double Capricorn, how difficult these things are for me to accept. I hope that my experience can enlighten you a little bit into the things that are going on now. How I think the most exciting thing, except I'm expressing an experience of doom and gloom, which is no fun. I never had children naturally, but the thing is, I went on to study astrology, whether I liked it or not. I didn't like all this hooey-fooey stuff, but I needed to find something to wrap my head around that would help me explain things. And astrology did eventually. I learned about the yugas. The yugas are a system of ancient epochs, or large. Well, you'll just have to watch my YouTube video that explains what the yugas are, and that we are rapidly advancing, and that we're moving into an age quickly. Mind you, we have, starting with the 1900s, the turn of the last century, the century that my grandparents grew up in. They grew up with horse and buggy, and before they passed on, they watched men land on the moon. Things have changed a little bit since they were here, and for me too, and for you too. And it's going to change very rapidly. Time is speeding up, and the time of the Garden of Eden will return to us very quickly. Now, how are we going to take that trip? That's the big question. Can we stop the Earth's destruction? That's the question. And that I don't know. I was shown these things whether I liked it or not, and hopefully we can learn from it. Now that I finally learned how to talk about it, at least. You know, I was the wrong person to have these experiences. But now there's many, many, many more that are coming forward and expressing their experiences. So you must remember that you only begin to live when you die. I will ask you to look at the YouTube I did on the yugas, and another YouTube I did on my outer body experience, and I'll leave the URLs in the comments section. And if you want to keep up with the next video I'm going to do that talk about the City of Knowledge and what I learned there, please subscribe. It would be my great, great joy and pleasure to share this with you.